Select Federal Natural Resource Management Committee meeting today in Laramie. And just to start things off, we've had some discussion, but we wanted to let everybody know. We're looking at adding an item at the end of the agenda, dealing with the Good Neighbor Authority. And if it's acceptable to the committee, we will look at potentially amending the bill that we passed out of our August meeting. Was it August? I think it was, yeah. So with that, I guess we probably need to start with a roll call.
Senator Dockstader.
Here.
Senator Larson.
Here. Here.
Here. There we go.
Representative Davis.
Here.
Representative Erickson.
Here.
Co-chairman Ide.
Here.
Chairman Wharf.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Appreciate everybody being here. Ask everybody that's in the audience, please be sure to sign in when you come in, so we have a record of your attendance. The next item on the agenda is minutes approval from the August meeting.
I'd make a motion,
Okay,
Mr. Chairman, to approve. Second.
a motion's been made. Do we have to call a roll call on that, or we just, okay, all those in favor? Aye. Okay, any opposed? Okay. We're going to move on then, go to item number 2 on the agenda. It's Federal Natural Resource Policy Account, or FNRPA. We're going to start off with our LSO staff. Talise, are you doing that, or?
Mr. Chairman, Polly Scott from LSO's on Zoom, and she'll be doing this first one.
Oh, okay. And you said Chloe?
Polly.
Polly, okay. Thank you. Go ahead, Polly.
Can you hear me? Can you hear
Now
me?
we can. We got you now, Polly. Thank you.
Can you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, can you hear us?
I cannot hear the committee meeting through the Zoom.
We can hear you. I'm not sure. We're looking at it, trying to figure out where we're at.
I cannot hear you.
Larson, if we can hear.
Dan, can you hear us? Representative Larson?
I
Yes,
cannot hear
actually.
you.
I can hear you.
Okay, so Representative Larson can hear us. Can you hear us
I'm
now,
going to
Polly?
exit the Zoom and re-enter, and I think that may solve the problem.
Okay. The joys of technology, huh? That's right, reboot.
Okay, can you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
We can hear you.
Mr.
Can you hear
Chairman?
us?
I
Can you hear
cannot
us,
hear
Polly?
you. Must be something with my computer. Apologize, Mr. Chairman. I'm just going to get some assistance and see if I can fix my computer problem. Just one moment.
Okay, if it's okay, I'm gonna jump down to the governor's office and we'll bring Polly in when she can. I'll invite you guys up to the table.
Uh,
Please introduce yourself so everybody at home knows who you are too.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Randall Luthi. I'm Governor Gordon's policy director. Governor Gordon sends his best. This is a committee that he has always followed. It's always a fascinating committee just because of the subject matter itself. Today, I'm pleased to bring along with me Nolan Rapp, who is our energy resources policy lead. He also works with the state BLM and the federal agencies within the state and somewhat on the federal level as well. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, understand we're going to talk today about the Federal Natural Resources Policy Act. And I believe I can safely say I'm the only person who was around who debated this bill back in 1999. They allowed me to leave high school and actually come down to the legislature to talk about this bill, because I'm sure that's the only way I would have been able to do that. But what has happened is we have just had a fantastic 25-year relationship between the state government and local governments in implementing this policy. I remember it well, and it was a controversial item at the time. But let me just reset the stage a little bit about where we were in 1999. First of all, 1995, wolves were reintroduced to Yellowstone National Park over the objection of the state. It was the Clinton administration, and they continued to reach into areas what we considered as a legislature well out of their bounds. They continued to change management plans, redo all sorts of federal policies. And while we at the state level were reasonably well equipped, to comment on regs, to actually bring forth litigation was necessary. But it was really very clear that the local governments were not. And I don't mean that as a negative at all for the local governments. It's just that flat out financially, we didn't have the resources to do that. So that was the purpose of the Federal Natural Resources Policy Act. And I'll tell you, it was passed largely along party lines. There were two parties at the time. And it was the discussion, why do you want to set aside money to challenge what the federal government is doing? And short answer was absolutely yes, we do. Now, it does change as from administration to administration, but that was the purpose. I believe the first appropriation was just over $300,000. So if I just take just a moment, I just wanted to really talk about one thing. I'm just going to read to you for a little bit. This was the purpose of the Federal Natural Resources Policy Act. There is created an account known as the Federal Natural Resource Policy Account. Funds within the account may be expended by the governor on behalf of the state of Wyoming and its local governments to take any of the actions specified in the subsection related to federal land, water, air, mineral, and other natural resource policies which may affect the tax base of the state, wildlife management, state species, recreation, private property rights, water rights, or leasehold rights. Funds also may be expended for preparing and participating in environmental impact statements and environmental assessments, including analysis of the economic or social or natural or physical environmental effects on the human environment. Funds may also be expended for coordinating and participating in rangeland health assessments, and the governor may expend funds from the Natural Resource Policy account. So that was the purpose. And I do believe it's worked well. And the overall process, Nolan's our expert on this, but my high level view is counties actually come to us, local governments, with proposals. And most of the time is they want to be able to comment on resource management plans. They want to comment on environmental impact statements that affect them. And they come with a proposal. And often they contract out for expert advice, professionals, witnesses, whichever, but to help prepare those documents. We approve those on a reimbursement basis. Overall, I would say the average appropriation now has gone from that 300,000 to about 1 million. And again, my opinion, it couldn't be it couldn't be spent for a better purpose. Because what it's done is actually brought in our local governments as partners, which in Wyoming, we've always included them and thought they were our partners. And it's just been a great thing. So with that, I trust you won't have any questions for me, but you will have plenty for Nolan.
Thank you, Nolan. Would you like to say anything?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Good morning, Chairman, members of the committee. Randall covered it extremely well. The few things that I would add from the policy side is just how lucky we are in Wyoming that we have counties that we can partner with, like Randall mentioned, organizations like the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. There's not many states that really have our counties in lockstep, especially when we deal with the federal government and their land management plans. Much of the FNRPA dollars, whether it's through the county commissioners or through the counties, we see value back just working on the state side, whether it's hosting NEPA trainings, coordinating with meetings to make sure that we are on the same page. It really allows us to have many voices when we are commenting and dealing with the federal government. It might sound great to have, comments coming from the state, but in instances like the Rock Springs RMP through the BLM, when you have 5 other counties that are really mirroring that message and approaching it from their specific expertise, that is just invaluable. It allows us also to, defend Wyoming and our resources during hostile administrations, as well as promote what we would like to see in more friendly administrations. So the value doesn't just come and go as elections, swing back and forth. I know in the last committee, land use plans were specifically mentioned, the last committee meeting. That was a special initiative, which we have seen incredible value from. Each one of the counties that have been involved in the current BLM RMP processes, those land use plans have been used. We've had the ability in the governor's office to mention them in our governor's consistency review. And, really you can tell which counties have had, the most interaction with the federal government by basically how new those land management plans are. And, we've had folks who are with the current Department of Interior that, are intimately familiar with those county plans because we, have commented incessantly on it through the last administration. Commissioners and other local government officials, they wear many hats. And, this really allows them to have that additional expertise, that ability to get involved where they otherwise might not have that ability. So we really see the benefit on multiple layers of the government. But with that, we're open to any questions and appreciate your time.
Thank you. Committee,
Go ahead and start with Ms. Davis.
all right, Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nolan, could you please tell me the last time these county land use plans were updated or have they been updated from the original conceptions?
Thank you for the question, Chairman Representative Davis. I believe the initiative for it, which was, I could be incorrect here, but the initiative was in 2019 through the legislature, which had a special carve out to redo these land use plans. It was on a voluntary basis by the county, so the county still had to apply for the FNRPA dollars to do that. Some of them I think were as recent as 2022. So you'll see most of them done between 19 and 22. I would say with the last administration, when we had the last influx of land management plans, they were definitely the most recent ones that were referred to. Some of the other counties who might not have resource management plans or theirs had been revised more frequently. I don't believe they were updating theirs as recently, but yeah, if that answers your question.
Senator Dockstader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nolan talked about days working in a hostile administration. Back in those days, I gathered up my Senate colleagues from the southwestern part of the state, and we made a trip out to DC to say, what are you doing to us? What can we do to work better together? Well, that's all shifted now, and we have an administration that's good to work with. In your opinion, in the governor's office opinion, what can we be doing better to take advantage of this? For example, I told my county commissioners in the past 2 weeks, I said some things have drastically changed in your favor. You're missing the opportunity. What can we be doing across the state to pick up on that opportunity better and make hay while the sun is shining?
Absolutely. No, thank you, Chairman. Senator Dockstader. I think continuing the same approach regardless of the administration, you just have a different message there. So to particularly tout the work of the County Commissioners Association, there are members in the, especially in the Department of Agriculture out in DC, who know Micah Christensen by name. That advocacy does not stop regardless of who's in office. It just kind of changes direction from, you know, we no longer want to be ignored. We have these land use plans. We have these comments. The local governments need to be heard from, to then shifting, how can we work together? You know, what type of things can we include so that that voice is continued on regardless of who's in the administration? So programs like FNRPA, you know, that money is there, again, regardless of who's in office, but those projects and what those grant dollars go to can be adjusted to fit the need for what comes before the counties.
Mr. Chairman, if I might.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Dockstader. And as I sat here, I realized that, you know, this is the reason this has to be one of my favorite committees is I have both my representative and senator on it, right? So I recognize that. Thank you both. Let me just say amen to what Nolan said, but what has changed? I mean, as counties have been going through resource management plans, EAs, environmental assessment or environmental impact statements from in the last 4 years, we will get those again from the federal government. But it might very well be as our research, our comments are instead of in complete opposition and, you know, what the hell are you doing? It is probably, hopefully it's going to be, yes, our economic data backs this decision up. Yes, our data on our natural resources backs this decision up. This is how they should be managed. And one of the first ones that we'll see that is the Rock Springs Management Plan. So thank you.
Thank you. Follow up.
That did it. Thank you.
Good. Any other questions? Senator Co-Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you guys for being here. Maybe help me understand a little bit. I don't want to get into the weeds too far, but does the governor, I guess the first question is, does the governor have full autonomy over those FNRPA funds? And I just want to back up a little bit. About a year before I got into office, you know, the Marton Ranch acquisition by the BLM in Natrona and Carbon counties, you know, from my vantage point, they violated that constitutionally, where they're supposed to get consent from the state legislature before they can purchase any more land within a state. The governor's office chose a different route. It was more of procedurally, they didn't go through the right comment period and those sorts of things. And that's where, you know, it filed a complaint on that and kind of held it up there. But what sort of authority do legislators and county commissioners have if they have a disagreement with the executive office on the approach to pushing back against, as you mentioned, Mr. Ruthie, you know, challenging the federal government on the way they're going about steamrolling the states at certain times? Could you answer those as far as just the autonomy of the locals that you're referring to, whether that's, you know, state representatives, legislators or county commissioners, and then explain who has authority to, I guess the governor's office does, to appropriate those funds to fight maybe a lawsuit or whatever. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Luthi.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's a lot to unpack there. So I will hit the high level, and if we get into more details, Nolan's available. The governor was appropriated the use of the funds. Now, over the last 25 years, a process has been developed. The local governments, basically present, here's how we want to spend the money. This is what we're going to do. In my time in working with it, and I will be the first to admit, Nolan does this on a day-to-day basis. I do not. I don't believe we've ever said no. There might be some question about the amount. There might be some question about, where it was spent. But that overall plan, we feel strongly, is generally dictated. So that's the FNRPA side of it. And normally, again, that isn't always used for litigation. On the state side, we have what we call HB 300 attorneys, which are attorneys dedicated to deal with natural resources cases. So with that, I think I will just, pass on to Nolan, and he can give you the day-to-day example.
Nolan, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman, Mr. Co-Chair. Yeah, I would say, the authority is, we stick pretty close to what's in statute. The counties do approach the governor's office with the project in mind, what they're interested in. Oftentimes we'll ask for the counties to have, some skin in the game if they would cover, a certain percentage of the total cost, things like that. We're fortunate, as I mentioned before, that we work pretty hand in glove with the counties. And so, if they would like to share their comments with us, things like that, we can provide, our own commentary. But generally speaking, if they would apply for a grant to be able to participate in a federal process, much of that is just, that sounds great. You guys know your county the best. Go forth. We want to make sure that the money is actually being used to comment. And if they would like to share it with us before they submit them, they can. But I don't think there's a level of micromanagement that's going into dictating what they are going to comment.
Follow up?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your answers. Yeah, it's, when you mention a grant, would that grant be requested from the local level, and then that would come from FNRPA? And, and those were some of the arguments that I don't think at the state level they were looking at as much as the county level, where, when they bought that ranch, we lost that tax base in Natrona, Carbon County. And then, I find out that there's no more PILT payments because you've reached, the threshold on the population base. So, there's harm to the counties in particular on those things. And if those things keep happening, you start gobbling up your entire tax base of the county. So it would seem that the local level would have a lot of sway to help articulate the argument at the executive level. Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? I'm going to ask one question, and I'm going to ask it to everybody. So don't feel bad, other than you guys wouldn't have been first up, but somebody tipped off Polly. So no, if you could be king for a day, how would you make it better?
Well, that's quite a question, Mr. Chairman. I mean, the first thing I would look at is make sure there are adequate resources available. And you're going to hear from the county commissioners after us, so I think they're more fair to say how well or not well that we're working with them. But I think if there's something as a rule, and I don't mean to be stumbling around, is truly this has worked really well for 25 years. Could it be more smooth? Could we maybe be faster on the reimbursements? Possibly. I'm more than willing to look at that.
Nolan?
Thank you, Chairman. Again, yeah, that's a fantastic question. And, from the policy side in the governor's office, I think the recent additional resources with the County Commissioners Association has been extremely helpful from, my day to day. their ability to be able to have this be their full-time job to assist the counties. And, since that money is funneled from the state, our state agencies, the governor's office, we really do benefit from what they're able to host. And there are many programs there, from NEPA trainings, getting some DC Eastern Congressional staffers to Wyoming to, actually see what federal land is. All those have just, each year I'm impressed by the value we get back and the values the county see from it. So as Randall mentioned, making sure that those resources are there, it's incredibly valuable.
Thank you. So I'm going to let you go, but I'm going to give you a homework assignment, okay? I want you to think we probably got the most state-friendly administration that we've had in a long time. And I want you guys to kind of put together a list of how you would prioritize the things that the federal government's doing in the state of Wyoming that you think the state of Wyoming should be and has the ability of doing.
Chairman, could you just repeat that again, please?
I don't know if I can do that or not, but no, what I would like to know is if I would like to see a prioritized list that we could take advantage of as a state and as a state legislature, the friendliness that we have under this current administration and the appearance that they're willing to give more authority to the states that in the past the federal government has been doing. Because I think talking to the members of this committee, I think that's something we're very interested in, is seeing we got the Good Neighbor Authority, but there's other things, and I guess that's what I'd like, is to see a prioritized list so that we can all maybe align. And we're probably not going to get everything on the list, but if we could pick out the first top one or two, I think we've got the opportunity to make some significant gains. And so let's take advantage of that. We got 3.5 years under this current administration, and Wyoming's very fortunate to have as much, I think, influence and association with this administration, and I think we should take advantage of that. So that will be the same assignment for the County Commission Association, and I'll give that to Polly when she gets her too. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, I'm an old legislator, so I hate to give up a microphone until it's ripped out of my hands. But yeah, just right off the bat, there are some good ones. Jory mentioned Good Neighbor Authority. You're going to talk about that later. Currently, we are in discussions about how to use that Good Neighbor Authority, particularly on Forest Service, where we would like the state to at least maybe start a couple of pilot projects in 2 of the forests, or maybe and see what can actually be managed at the state level. Part of that also comes with who pays for that management. And so those are the discussions. I mean, the quick answer is sometimes, well, we can sell the timber. Usually those timber sales won't cover it. But that leads me into the next thing that Governor Gordon has said more than once. He would like to look at, can the state manage the sale of coal, oil, and gas leases? And be the collector of that funds, and then we send the share to the feds as opposed to the feds sending the share to us. There's 2.
And Director Luthi, that's exactly what I'm looking at, is how we can make those. I mean, whoever came up with the Good Neighbor Authority, we obviously want to take more advantage of that. But what's the next item that we should have out there? We don't have anything similar to that with the BLM. And should we be making a similar push to get something like that going through our BLM offices? And I don't want to jade anybody's thoughts. I just think we've got an opportunity, and we better strike while that iron's hot. So I think you understand what it is I'm asking for, but I'm excited. I think everybody in this room should be excited because I think we are alive at a very important time. And I think we have the ability to make some rather significant changes for our state and the people that live here. So with that, any other questions? Oh,
Oh, we've done it now.
yep. Now you're in trouble, Representative Davis.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Randall, is this similar to what we do in the Ag Department and the DEQ with primacy for the state of Wyoming? Is that the goal that we're looking for here?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Davis, I would say yes, but I think it goes a step further. We're not just enforcing federal regulations. We're actually playing a bigger part in the actual management. We would probably have more say in what timber sales would be offered, where they're offered. And again, as we work through, also the federal government's looking at a lot of changes in NEPA as well, of how to streamline that process. Couldn't agree with it more, but that probably means the state may end up doing some of that NEPA process as well, which again, as long as we have the resources to do it, I think we can do it faster and certainly more adequately. Mr. Chairman, Co-Chairman, I don't believe anyone has accused you of not being able to think outside the box. I have often wondered if you even knew what the box was, but I appreciate that. So, yeah.
Yes, Director Luthi, my understanding is I don't have the box. The federal government has the box and I want to put them back in it. So did you have a follow-up, Representative Davis? Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Senator Co-Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question for you guys. Last year, I checked with LSO. I was curious to how many lawsuits that we have, federal natural resource lawsuits with the U.S. government. Can you comment on that? I mean, do you know that number? I mean, it was pushing like 50 lawsuits. And with our, we're always referring to them as our federal partners, which it doesn't seem right that you have 50 lawsuits with a partner, but that's the reality of it. Do you know that number? Is it coming down, and how does that affect the account, the FNRPA account, with those lawsuits? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That was total, and it was over 50. Now that dealt with Department of Health. It dealt with, most of the federal agencies. We do talk about the federal government as our partner. I generally refer to it as a shotgun marriage, and one you can't divorce from as a rule. So we don't always agree with the feds, and it does change, and absolutely. The number of those natural resources, specifically related lawsuits, I believe is sitting right about at 33, which is basically unchanged. But I don't want you to take too much from that, because probably more than half of them are in what we call in abeyance, because the federal government has probably indicated, one, they're going to rescind those rules that we were, fighting. And they're, what that does is just stop the litigation for a while. So the next phase would probably be dismissing those lawsuits. But then after the federal government brings forth their proposals, you can almost bet that every group that loved the administration's views of 4 years ago, 3 years ago, will now sue against whatever these regulations are. So once again, we come back in, but instead of on the offense, we'll be with the federal government on the defense. So I don't actually expect the number to go down significantly, but I suspect that the effort's going to change and the focus will be different.
Thank you. All right, I guess you wore us out. So thank you for your testimonies and your input today.
Mr. Chairman, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to meet with all of you. Thanks.
Thank you. Now I see Polly's back. Polly, can you hear us now?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I can hear you now.
Okay, your volume's a little low for me. Can we?
Yes.
That's all right. We're going to see if we can increase it here, Polly, on our end.
Okay. Is
Go
that
ahead
better?
and talk.
Okay. Well, thank you for your
Yeah,
patience.
that's much better.
Okay. Thank you for your patience, Mr. Chairman. Polly Scott, Senior Fiscal Analyst with the LSO Budget Fiscal Division. Your online memo 2-01 is a memo that I prepared. It's addressing the committee's request for background on the Federal Natural Resource Policy Account, also known as FNRPA, or just the account. And the legislature, as already was mentioned, created this account 25 years ago in 1999. And the allowable expenditures or use of the account are codified in Wyoming Statute 94218. And would you like me to share my screen so that you can see the memo?
Can we do that?
Yep.
All right.
There we go. Do you see that?
Yeah, and if we could get a little more volume, I've had a couple chairmen saying they're having a hard time hearing her. If we could get the volume turned up in the room for her, please.
Okay. Okay. So this is the memo that's in your packet. Now, in general, the account was created to enable state and local government participation in the preparation of environmental impact statements, to monitor federal natural resource issues, and also to participate in litigation. The governor's office may allocate the money for these purposes. And in fiscal year 2025, the governor's office gave grants to the Wyoming County Commissioners Association, the Attorney General's office, and the Coalition of Local Governments. They all received FNRPA money from the governor's office, and that is in attachment A for detail. Now, moving on, table 1 of the memo just gives you the fiscal year-end balance of the FNRPA account. At June 30, 2025, the account had $3.8 million in it. And initially, the governor's office would make separate reports to the legislature on the activities of FNRPA and request funding for FNRPA. But starting in fiscal year, or in the 2015-2016 biennium, the governor's office was directed to begin submitting regular budget requests for FNRPA and reporting on FNRPA activities as part of the budget development process. So table 2 here does go over the last 6 biennia of appropriations for the FNRPA account. And these appropriations are requested through the governor's office in their natural resources division. You can, peruse the table, but in general, the baseline request has been $1 million from the general fund per biennium for the FNRPA account. And there's description of when the legislature has maybe modified the budget request to be slightly different. Just one thing that I'll highlight is that in 2019, there was a separate standalone bill that appropriated $1.15 million to FNRPA, and that was for the development and revision of county natural resource management plans. And the governor's office did report that $750,000 of that has been granted out to counties for that, and approximately $210,000 is encumbered for future use. And some of that did revert back to the general fund, $190,000 approximately. I'll also just highlight that in the second year of the 21-22 biennium, that was the year when we were experiencing revenue shortfalls, and all the state government agencies had to take reductions, and FNRPA also took a reduction there, and you can see in the table the reduction of $900,000. But at that point in time, they were given an appropriation to spend special revenue, which in this case is from the cash balance of the account of $550,000. And really from that point on, there has been some appropriation from the cash balance of the account, as well as some appropriation from the general fund. Then I'll also highlight that in our most recent biennium here, the last row of the table, There was an addition of $1 million of special revenue along with a budget footnote, which specified that $850,000 of that could be used for the cost of 2 full-time employees in a statewide association representing counties. And that was to be continued, that $850,000 in the standard budget. So this coming biennium will be the first biennium where this division of the governor's office has a standard budget of $850,000. Prior to this, all the budget requests have been exception requests. And the standard budget is, kind of a baseline budget that we expect in general to go forward. Now, also, just on the next page that goes into a bit of detail about the grant to the Wyoming County Communities Association. So since 2010, the governor's office has provided a grant to the Wyoming County Commissioners Association to support counties in this area. They initially used that to hire a full-time attorney, and the County Commissioners Association reported to me that since the amount has increased now, they have brought on an additional staff member, and that person is not an attorney, but someone who is expert more in the science background, that specializing in matters related to natural resource management. And the County Commissioner's Office does provide an annual report on their activities, and that their most recent report is included in your memo as attachment C. And with that, Mr. Chairman, that's really the summary that I had for you.
Thank you, Polly. Any questions? Sounds like my mic's either going down or there we go. I just had the volume down. Any questions for Polly from the committee? Okay, Mr. Co-Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to ask, this 2020 or 21-22, they added 250,000 for study of federal land related to payment in lieu of taxes. We've got some literature sitting on our desk here. Is this what we received, or is that what was accomplished? Or did that come? I think that came from the County Commissioners Association here. So what was the impetus of that study that you did 2 years ago? Thank you. Or 3 years ago.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the question. I am not informed about the content of that study, but I will take a note to find that study and provide it to the committee, if that would be helpful.
Thank you, Polly. That would be great. Follow up? Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Polly. Maybe stick around just in case. I know sometimes as we get going, somebody will think up a question, think, oh man, I wish I'd asked that. So yeah, I can ask you if you'll just stick around till we go on to the next topic, if you don't mind. Thank
Certainly,
you.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next presenters on the agenda is County Commission Association, and Jeremiah, you and whoever else you'd like to bring to the table. I just ask the introduce yourselves. Thank you. Go ahead, Jeremiah.
All right. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Jeremiah Riemann here on behalf of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. I appreciate your consideration of this topic. It's one, or at least the account, I don't have as much history as Randall does with this, but I've got a bit of history. For the first 6 years of the Governor Meade administration, I managed this account within that office. And now I get to be on the recipient side and working with the counties as it relates to this. You did hear reference to the end of the Friedenthal administration and the beginning of the grant to the County Commissioners Association. If you will, at that time, there were roughly 8 to 10 resource management plans being revised across the state. That was both BLM and Forest Service plans. Of course, we had greater sage grouse at its real height of consideration. First governor's executive order, the BLM revising plans across the U.S. And many counties were looking to seek resources from the account. And Governor Friedenthal ultimately came to the conclusion that it might make a bit more sense if we put money in one place and have an attorney available to all of the counties, that we might have a bit more focused, consistent, coordinated approach to those land use plans. So he made that initial appropriation to the County Commissioners Association at the end of his term. Of course, Governor Meade comes into office the next month, and I'll be honest, it was one of the best investments that I felt had been made. We worked very closely with their staff and with the county commissioners moving forward, and a lot of different arenas, both from trying to ensure that the plans said what they needed to say for Wyoming, but also in the arena of litigation. And as you heard from the governor's office, some of that was to defend the decisions that the federal government had made, and in others, it was going on the offense to push back against bad policies that would otherwise hurt us. You have a copy of our most recent report to the governor's office in the LSO memo. So I don't intend to go through all of the various elements of that particular document and all of the various ways that we're involved in our office around that. I might highlight a few things. Of course, we're commenting on any number of actions that the federal government's taking, whether that's a policy that they're looking to implement or a land and resource management plan. We're helping to lead collaboratives and try and come to good, positive decisions. And you'll hear the commissioners and Micah talk about that. In 2015, our association, as you know, led an effort to try and resolve the wilderness study areas across the state, and this resource was helpful for us. That ultimately is trying to resolve 577,000 acres of wilderness study areas in Campbell, Carbon, Fremont, Hot Springs, Johnson, Natrona, and Washakie counties. And what I can say is that that act passed the Senate at the end of last year. Now, of course, we're in a new Congress, so it'll have to be passed again, but we feel that's pretty perfunctory on the Senate side, but we're pretty encouraged that that will happen in the House either this year or next year as part of this Congress, and that we will have done something positive for residents and resources across the state. Of course, you've all had, I think, the opportunity to engage with our congressional tour. And without the support of the FNRPA grant, we wouldn't be able to do that. Now, counties are bringing over 50% of the financial resources for that, but FNRPA helps to support that. And we're bringing 15 to 20 influential, geographically diverse individuals into the state so that they can hear about our natural resource issues, hear how Wyomingites solve these critical things that we face on a daily basis. And I can tell you that to date, we've brought 57 congressional staffers to Wyoming and have visited 17 counties. Next year, we will complete our 5-year rotation with the final 6 counties. But this year, we were able to visit Natrona, Fremont, Sweetwater, and Carbon counties with that congressional tour. And what's great is that we have been invited to participate in more congressional hearings than we have ever been before, and have made inroads. You heard about Micah's connection to the Department of Agriculture and the Forest Service. That's born out of those sorts of interactions, because now some of those congressional staffers are now embedded into various agencies. So it is a long game that we're playing there, but it has been one that we're pretty excited about. And we just had a conversation at our most recent meeting, and commissioners have indicated their desire to continue that for another 5 or 6 years. So a financial commitment that they're ready to put forward. I did want to just mention a couple of things relative to the questions that you've already asked. First off, in terms of sort of those opportunities, a couple that came to my mind when you brought that up. You have a bill later today that you're going to review relative to the federal government giving the state authority or greater autonomy to manage leasing and other things of that. One thing that we pursued many years ago, and we're interested in continuing this conversation, is if you go into the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, it actually provides that other parties can develop those documents that are being prepared by federal agencies. We were able to do that a few years ago in Sublette County. It was specific to a grazing amendment, and the county took the lead on developing and making that decision through that with the support of the federal government. Now, that was a grazing specific activity. We're looking to sort of build that up and maybe go to a higher level document. And we won't be able to do that without support from an account like the FNRPA account. You've heard talk about our natural resource management plans. We're getting to a time frame where we might need to start amending and revising those, and you're going to hear the commissioners talk about that. But that's another place where we can go on the offensive and use that, because it is, and Micah will talk about it, a component of the federal acts that govern what these agencies do. I'll just close by saying that it's been a wonderful partnership with the governor's office around this fund. Whether it was my time in the office or whether it's been my time on the other side, I've never felt that the governor's office has dictated the outcomes that we have to come to. We have that autonomy to do the work. Certainly, we have to go and make the request of the governor's office for the funds. That's never expected. I'm always a little nervous, but it's always come. I've never seen a denial. It's been a good conversation. With that, Mr. Chairman, I want to turn it over to Micah so he can give you a little bit better sense about why counties are involved in these things. And then the commissioners will share more specific elements of how they're involved in this work.
Micah, welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Worf, Co-Chairman Ide, and members of the committee. My name is Micah Christensen, and I currently serve as the Natural Resource Counsel for the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. I'm the 4th attorney that served in this role since it was created in 2010. And prior to working with the WCCA, I was an assistant attorney general, and I represented the Wyoming Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. So you may be asking, and I think the memos were all great on, and certainly hearing from the governor's office on why counties need to be involved. You heard about wolves. Obviously, this committee also evaluated the Roldus Area Conservation Rule, which was put in place in 2001. It had substantial impacts to our counties and our forests. But why should counties have a natural resource council? Why have an attorney? I'll give you 2 answers. The first is coordination. The second, cooperation. Now, both of these terms are legal terms of art created by federal law, and they outline specific requirements of federal agencies and specific opportunities for local governments to engage in land management decisions, planning, and implementation. Coordination and cooperation represent the zenith of local engagement with federal government on all matters concerning public lands. Although distinct, federal coordination and local government cooperation work best in tandem. And that's what we do. So I'll just jump in quickly with on coordination. Both the Federal Land Policy and Management Act, or FLPMA, and the National Forest Management Act, or NIFMA, contain coordination requirements with officially adopted local plans. Now, Wyoming has a statute, Wyoming Statute 185208B, which provides in part, the Board of County Commissioners of a county which has officially adopted a comprehensive plan may participate in efforts to coordinate the plan with federal agencies as provided by FLPMA and NIFMA and any other federal statute which provides for coordination with local governments and federal regulations adopted pursuant to those acts. Now, this statute shows the reason why we do it. And I also I took a trip recently to Idaho to present a NEPA presentation to Idaho County Commissioners, and they are currently looking at proposing as an association a bill that would create a law that reads just like this, so that Idaho counties can have that legal jurisdiction to be coordinating their plans with federal agencies, just like we have in Wyoming. 43 USC 1712 C9, which is in FLPMA, outlines the BLM's responsibilities to coordinate with local government plans. Now, what exactly does coordination mean? Well, in the case of FLPMA, the BLM is required to keep apprised of local plans. So each time a county updates its natural resource plan, is what we usually call them in Wyoming, the BLM is to be apprised of those plans. Now, under the state statute, counties are required to update those plans in an open public process. And many of our counties specifically reach out to federal agencies, including the BLM, to review those plans and provide comments on those plans. And those plans contain priority statements, objectives of counties, and have a lot of detail regarding history, socioeconomics, and things that keep counties functioning. The federal government is to ensure that federal land use plans are considered by officially adopted state and local plans, that the policies and programs there are considered in the planning process, provide meaningful opportunities for participation in land management planning, and most significantly, ensure federal plans are, quote, consistent with state and local plans to the maximum extent consistent with federal law. This is potentially the biggest hook we have as local governments on guiding federal direction when it comes to resource management planning. If we have plans that describe the priorities and objectives of local governments, the federal government, in the case of the BLM under FLPMA, is required to be as consistent to the maximum extent that is consistent with federal law. Coordination is also a continuing obligation of the federal government. It's not a one-off. It's not just for planning. It is forever. And then, as you heard from the governor's office earlier, governors may review proposed BLM plans and submit recommendations for achieving consistency, also oftentimes called consistency review. And our association and our counties have participated in providing detailed comments on consistency or inconsistencies with local plans to aid the governor's office in their consistency review. Now, when it comes to NIFMA, the Forest Service must provide early notification and continuous opportunities for coordination with state and local governments in the development, amendment, and revision of its forest plans. Forest plans must consider the land use plans of local governments and coordinate to the extent practicable while meeting national forest priorities. The Forest Service also must meet, consult, and cooperate with local officials to address conflicts and seek consistency when possible. And planning records must document how local plans were considered and coordinated in forest planning. Now, we've seen in Wyoming, which is different than other states, the Forest Service actually fulfilling its obligation for coordination. The greatest example I think I can pull from is the Thunder Basin National Grassland, where the Forest Service put an appendix where they identified the Campbell County, Converse County plans and detailed where they were consistent, where they were inconsistent, and the reason why they were inconsistent with local plans, and then areas where they were going to amend the plan to ensure consistency with local plans. Without natural resource plans, there is no ability for the federal government to do a consistency review of that nature. We'll likely see a similar planning consistency review coming out of the Newcastle RMP, which is very promising. Again, having plans allows the federal government to comply with their obligations for coordination and consistency. Now, On to cooperation, the second term of art. And Talisa did a great job writing a little NEPA history. Cooperation is the heart of NEPA when it comes to local government engagement. All major federal actions that significantly affect the human environment are required to comply with the National Environmental Policy Act. NEPA's congressional declaration in 42 U.S.C. 4331 states, quote, "It is the continuing policy of the federal government in cooperation with state and local governments to foster and promote the general welfare, to create and maintain conditions under which man and nature can exist in productive harmony, and fulfill the social, economic, and other requirements of present and future generations of Americans." Now, one thing about NEPA that it's frustrating at times, but people will often misquote NEPA. They'll say NEPA is the National Environmental Protection Act, not the Policy Act. And even when they have National Environmental Policy Act in place, because environmental is in the name and it is a big piece and the heart of the act itself, they forget often this line here, which is that they need to fulfill the social, economic, and other requirements of present and future generations. This is what your county commissioners do when they participate in cooperating agency processes. They make sure the government is aware, the federal government in this case, is aware of social, economic, and other impacts to their communities that those Forest Service, BLM wouldn't have the data necessary to understand, wouldn't have the information because they're not there. They're not running a county. They're not, they haven't lived in the county. They don't know the history of the county. And so this is, again, why it's so important for counties to be engaged as cooperating agencies. To operationalize the congressional declaration, federal agencies invite state, tribal, and local governments to participate in NEPA processes when they have jurisdiction by law or special expertise. Again, the state legislature did local governments a great favor by putting into law Wyoming Statute 185208A, which states, "When representing a county as a cooperating agency in matters related to the National Environmental Policy Act and in federal land planning, implementation, and management actions, a board of county commissioners shall be deemed to have special expertise on all subject matters for which it has statutory responsibility, including but not limited to all subject matters directly or indirectly related to the health, safety, welfare, custom, culture, and socioeconomic viability of a county." Again, the legislature put into law the jurisdiction that counties have special expertise, which opens up the door for our participation in the process. Unlike coordination, though, which is a requirement on federal agencies, cooperation provides local governments an opportunity. It's not a requirement of local governments to cooperate, but an opportunity for local governments to help inform planning decisions. The ability for county commissioners in the NEPA process is to co-create alternatives, provide local data and analysis to federal agencies, and review plan drafts. While counties' participation does not diminish the federal decision authority, by design, the cooperating agency process is collaborative and allows for specialists across jurisdictions to serve as sounding boards for ideas on how to best meet and manage vast landscapes that are right in our backyard. And with that, Mr. Chairman, it's my pleasure to turn the conversation over to our 3 county commissioners, 4 county commissioners, I can't count, and I'll turn it over first to you, Commissioner Teal.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, committee members, Lloyd Teal, Commissioner from Park County. I'm not going to repeat a lot of things that you already know. What I want to do is give you a perspective on what it is for a county commissioner in our neck of the woods and pretty much consistent across the state at different levels of what we have to deal and why. And trust me when I say I didn't drive 7 hours down here to testify if I didn't feel this is important, and it is. In Park County, we have 78% of our land is public lands. Okay, with 78% of that, we have to uphold all the infrastructure and deal with everything that goes along with that. Park County is a little bit unique, but it's pretty base example of the state. We have to deal with the Forest Service, Department of Agriculture, BLM, Bureau of Reclamation, and the National Park Service. That's a whole lot of different rules in each one of them. And if we didn't have this man here on speed dial, we couldn't do it. It would break our county. So with that, few statistics that came out of our natural resource plan that we put together that was very, very useful by allowing us a seat at the table, if you will, for our federal partners. I use that loosely as well. But 73% of our households in Park County are economically dependent, either directly or indirectly, from the public lands and our natural resources. That's a big chunk. 98% of our households in Park County use those public lands, not to mention the 2+ million people that come through the East Gate. And so we're forced with emergency services in our county and all these things. And all these policies, as they change, without the natural resource management plan that we have, and we wouldn't be able to have those meetings. And I'm going to go back just a little. Micah mentioned cooperation and coordination. That opens the door for the two things that I feel could solve all of our problems. I don't care if it's local, state, or even federal, and that's just education and communication. So if we can just sit down with these people and explain our side as to how this affects us and why we need something twisted, changed a little bit, and it gives us that chance to get in the beginning of these policies that are being written, I think it's tenfold worth everything. So I'm not going to go on and on. Will, I don't know if you want to take questions now or after, but I don't know if I have the right answer, but I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you. We'll go on. You going to go next? Okay, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Co-Chairman, and members of the community. Shout out to Carbon County Sweetwater Representative Davis. Thank you. Good morning. I'm John Espy. I'm serving my 13th year as a Carbon County Commissioner. I also serve on the NACO Western Interstate Region as the immediate past president. I also serve on NACO Vice Chair for NACO's Public Land Steering Committee. Carbon County is situated on Interstate 80, third largest county in the state, 50% public lands, kind of ground zero for the initial renewable energy that hit the state and way back before I was a county commissioner. We're the transportation corridor comes to us for the state. Just on a personal note, on my shipping trap on our north set of Corrals, I do a 1 call, 21 callbacks. Pipelines, fiber optics, you name it. Just we're at. If the nation kind of needs us for some reason, we have to deal with all the wrecks on Interstate 80, what it puts for emergency services. I lead to that, really the dependence of our public lands is what's formed Carbon County. And going back when I became commissioner was when kind of the WCCA and with FNRPA brought on Temple and the evolution that occurred through that time. Back then, we essentially had a county attorney whose job was to work on cooperating agency stuff along with our county planner. The feds seem to drop all this stuff. It's feast or famine. We'll go a while and there's nothing, and then they dump it all on us at once. That capacity, that expertise is very expensive for a county of 14,500 people to have to maintain that. The FNRPA account, the resources that are provided now through the WCCA, invaluable to us. What it saves in our county budget alone to where we can put those resources to search and rescue and that, and no offense to any attorneys in the room, but attorneys. FNRPA's, kind of directly and indirectly, funded numerous things. Short list here: Creston Continental Divide, the NEPA document that keeps on giving. Gas project, Hiawatha, energy development, Chokecherry, Sahara Madre, the feral horse gatherers, both on the north side and the south side. Sage grouse, grazing. And then the new one, pump storage, dealing with FERC. And I really want to kind of change a letter in that dealing with them, but I'm told I can't. And what brings back why I brought up my relationship with the National Association of Counties, when the National Old Growth, when they dropped that letter of intent, I do believe it was December of whatever year now, 24. Yeah, 23, 24. Carbon County and Johnson County, Wyoming were two counties in Wyoming, even though that they left out counties as cooperators when they dropped that in the Federal Register. We sent our letters demanding to be cooperating agencies on the National Old Growth Amendment. Carbon County is still waiting on a response letter for that. Just going, but in February that year, we were back in DC for a National Association of Counties Legislative Conference. And I kind of got a little upset a couple days before in the Forest Service office about not getting a response. Long story short, so the Forest Service didn't want to deal with all these counties that, they got 122 national forests, whether that's not my problem, that's their problem kind of attitude I had. They wanted the National Association of Counties to act as the cooperating agency. I said not only no, but hell no, as president of Western Interstate Region, the chair for the Public Land Steering Committee, Commissioner Todd Devlin out of Prairie County, Montana, agreed with us. We did agree that the National Association of Counties could help facilitate the communication, but as cooperators, it had to go, and this got ugly. I'm telling a story to tell a story, really. But as we worked through that, and the expertise that Micah gave us working through there, not only was for Wyoming, but Westwide, Micah's comments were plagiarized all over. Thank God we live in a state of Wyoming that supports public land counties and gives us this resource. Commissioners dealing with the state of Washington, commissioners in the state of Oregon, they didn't have that support. Supervisors in the state of California didn't have that support. But because of Wyoming, we were able to kill NOGA. I do truly believe it is because of this FNRPA account. And that had national implications. If they were allowed to amend all these plans like that without local input. And so having those resources here at a local level where we can come and we could come together and fight on the front end so that we're not litigating on the back end. If we can kill these things or at least modify them to where we can painfully live with them on the front end, saves us all a lot of time, resources on the back end. So, it kind of goes, to close out, it's turned Carbon County from a reactive kind of county to a proactive kind of county. So it's invaluable. And I made it when we were talking before this meeting, this group sitting up here before you, it's a force multiplier. I think every dollar that we spend out of that FNRPA account is saving the taxpayers multiple dollars on top of that. Instead of Carbon County, Natrona County, Washakie County, each duplicating it, we're coming together as a team and we're using taxpayer dollars in, I think, a very prudent way so that we can better fund these other services that local government is needed, and the cooperation that we have with state forestry, that we have with Department of Ag, Game and Fish, as we work together on these projects. It's brought us to where we're more in lockstep. There's times we disagree, but we agree way more than we disagree, and we move forward with that. That unified front is hard for these federal agencies to to fight back. So with that, I will turn it over to my former college classmate from the class of 1989 here at the University of Wyoming, Converse County Commissioner Jim Willigs.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. What's this building? I don't remember it ever being here. Sorry. Mr. Chairman, Jim Willigs, Converse County Commissioner. I'm in my 19th year, so I've lived kind of the history of this a little bit, and Terry's got a couple of years on me, but we've definitely seen the advancement of this. I steal a line, two different lines that I've stolen. Joel Bausman, Commissioner out of Sublette County, really was a big leader in this area on the national level. And he says, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And I think he stole it from somebody else, but I continue to repeat that method. We're at the table. And we don't always get turkey. Sometimes we get the cranberries with the red hots, and sometimes we get sweet potatoes. But if we're not at the table, we don't get anything. And the other thing I will steal, since we're in postseason baseball, we had a lot of bunt singles. Seldom do you get to the table and get a home run. We've had a few, but most time you're just trying to move the runner one base. Or if you're on defense, you're trying to get one more out. This is a process being engaged with these agencies. And as the administrations change, our approach changes. And in 19 years, we're fighting some of the same fights. But as John alluded at the end, we've been able to be a force multiplier. We've been able to make progress. We've saved taxpayer money. We've made a difference. In Converse County, our issues are more on the mineral side than the surface side. I think you're aware between Converse and Campbell County, there's a lot of energy coming out of there, and there's a lot of federal nexus. We have engaged a consultant that we actually share with Campbell County that does a lot of our work together because we have a lot of shared interests. But that force multiplier that John read is how we use, I hate to say use, take advantage of the opportunities we have with Micah and Tristan to coordinate comments. And there's been times we've taken the lead and they've been able to use our comments and vice versa. So that we have that ability. That force multiplier is a great example of how we engage and advance. Converse County commented on the Rock Springs plan. We had no direct nexus there, but our belief was if it could happen there, it can happen here. So we commented on that and we, advocated for those things. The people at this table killed NOGA, and John made that point about the efforts we put out there. Senator Dockstader had mentioned earlier, are we missing any opportunities? No, I don't think we miss any opportunities. Again, we may only get the bunt single, but we're not missing those opportunities. Senator Ide asked about, what if the states go in a different direction? To date, we've been parallel and adjacent. Sometimes our interests are more localized and the state's more broad, but I don't recall a time where we were opposite. And we've never been dictated to. The advantage is we get to coordinate and get that force multiplier from the state level in the agencies we work with. If I was king for a day, I would make sure the resource funding continues. Adding the second person through that FNRPA account recently has been incredibly valuable. Micah just didn't have enough hours in the day to do all that. But I want to give you just a concrete example of the things we've done since the first of the year in Converse County that we've used FNRPA resources for. Not the direct grant, but the efforts of WCCA and Micah and Tristan. So we've had 14 different opportunities to comment since January and have submitted 191 pages of stuff, all based off of those natural resource plans. And I'm just going to run through it very quickly. BLM sage grouse, NTEX West Antelope lease application, Department of Ag's roadless area, Laparelle Dam reconstruction EIS, environmental assessment, Buffalo Field Office, no coal leasing, Buffalo Field Office, West Antelope 3 project, intent to resource management plan amendment out of the Buffalo, Interior's National Environmental Policy Act regulations, interim final rule, Department of Ag's interim federal rule. Information on regulatory reform, letter of support for the Natural Resource Reconciliation Bill, which was to overturn no coal leasing. The second quarter oil and gas lease. This is my favorite, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service endangered species status for the Suckley's cuckoo bumblebee. Still haven't seen one. BLM's EA for the first quarter competitive lease for oil and gas. FONSI, significant and no significant findings. We get a monthly report from our consultant. It's 25 pages long of the issues and items that we are following, engaged in, sometimes supporting, sometimes against, but you've got to be at the table. The resources, the force multiplier, the FNRPA account makes that possible. Lets us continue to hit bunt singles, lets us continue to occasionally celebrate that home run. And so I look forward to any questions you may have, but I really appreciate the support this committee and the legislature has given to that over time. And the second part of this traveler today is next up. Lloyd gets the award, but I think Terry's next. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Wolf.
Thank you, Chairman Worf, Co-Chair Ide, and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. My name is Terry Wolf from Washakie County. I'm the chairman of the commission up there currently. I've been on the commission since 2003. Had the opportunity to be the president of WCCA, I believe it was 2008, 2009 timeframe. Past president of the Wyoming Association of County Officers, currently on the board of directors for NACO, and also serve as a vice chair for NACO's Environment, Energy, and Land Use Committee. And learned a lot, still learning a lot, and really enjoy the opportunity to just be out there and work with folks. Looking back some of the history here, in conjunction with the FNRPA assisting our county in developing natural resource management plans, our plan in 2020, it has also provided Washakie County with an opportunity to be engaged in the Bighorn National Forest Plan revision and the Bighorn Basin RMP. So just looking back, when I came on the commission in 2003, we had just started the Bighorn Forest Plan revision, and that included the 4 counties of the Bighorns, Washakie, Bighorn, Sheridan, and Johnson County. And at the time, we're like, boy, we put in to be cooperators, and so that was a good thing for us to do. But then we were learning on the ground, and we hit the ground running. But it's like, yeah, there was a lot to be involved with that. And one, as a small county like ours with one of the lowest valuations in the state, we didn't have the staff to know silviculture or aquatics or soils or different things like that, and neither did the other counties when we were looking at that. So we teamed up together, and the opportunity to tap into funding from FNRPA was there, and we matched dollars from the 4 counties and got FNRPA funds to help assist us with that. And we hired a consultant, Ecosystem Research Group. They were out of Missoula, Montana at the time, and that was a godsend for us to be able to have that expertise to help us out. We were early enough in the process. My counterpart here, Micah Christensen, that position was not open at the time till after we were done with that forest plan revision, and then even our BLM RMP. So the ability to utilize that expertise, and us as counties, and then the conservation districts of the 4 counties were there too. And at the very beginning of that, it was a little bit cumbersome. I remember that it seemed almost, and I don't think the Forest Service at the time really realized how counties wanted to be involved in that process and have a voice, and we were there in lockstep to make sure that happened. And so it was a little I don't want to say controversial at the time, but once they realized that we were there and we meant business, and we wanted to support our counties, things got a lot better. And by the end of that forest plan revision, the record of decision was signed in 2005. And one of the things that the counties wanted written in that record of decision, as we were referred to as a steering committee, the cooperators were, and we wanted to continue those steering committee meetings twice a year on an annual basis. And to date, that has been the case, other than COVID year. There was a meeting that was missed, and did one via Zoom. But since then, we go out on the ground in the late summer, do a field trip on actual projects that we've looked at as a steering committee, that are things are written into that plan, see how things are implemented on the ground. In the spring, we get together to see what looking forward to where things have happened and transitioned from previous projects, and it has been very good. And as far as I know, this is one of the only committees that has lasted this long and continued to this day, and been very effective in the country. So that's one key thing that came out of starting out as a group as we did in 2003 on the plan, to being as effective as we were at the end of that and to this date. Looking at the BLM RMP, We followed up with that for the Bighorn Basin there, and that was Hot Springs, Bighorn Park and Washakie counties there. And again, we tapped into the FERNERPA funds that were available. And again, with the effectiveness that and expertise that we had gotten from Ecosystem Research Group, we did hire them again. And again, it was a very solid working group of counties and conservation districts, and to be the ability to have that voice as we put that plan together. I mean, I don't think there could be any comparison of us not being there if you compared a plan without our voice and having that voice in there. So that was important. One indirect effect that the FERNERPA dollars has really helped us out is just in building those working relationships with federal agencies. Even though personnel changes over time in those agencies, we still have kept up that communication with them. And I can't count the number of times a field manager, a forest supervisor, or district ranger or other staff have called me, or I've called them. And just most recently here, a new district ranger came on the Powder River District of the Bighorns. He called me up about a month into his tenure there and asked, hey, can we get up on the forest and can you take me around a little bit? So I met him up there and we drove around for a day and pointed out some of the things that we'd worked on and gave him a history of the forest plan revision and where things were up to the point. And he was really kind of awestruck on to see how involved that commissioners wanted to be in dealing with forest lands. And so I think that impact is very important as we've developed things over time. So, and just moving on, additionally, Washakie and 15 other counties actively participated in the 2021 Greater Sage Grouse Amendment process. Wyoming County Commissioners decided that our engagement would be strongest if we worked together and spoke with a singular voice. Greater Sage Grouse conservation touches nearly every county in the state, and working through the process together proved to be a successful endeavor. The FERNERPA also allowed us to schedule meetings with guest speakers to discuss planned components from grazing, adaptive management, the credit system, oil and gas development, mining, population data, and the state's mapping efforts. Just last Friday, the BLM closed its comment period on significant changes document that reflected changes that we requested during the cooperating agency process. That's why our engagement is so important. Our involvement in local offices, office plan revisions, and our FERNERPA focuses squarely on federal lands and issues that matter most to our people: oil and gas production, recreation, grazing, timber, wildlife, and access, to name a few. FERNERPA allows counties to continue coordination with federal partners, take advantage of our cooperating agency status and special expertise, and sets expectations of what local governance and cooperative federalism look like. To summarize, the Federal Natural Resource Policy Account is not merely a funding mechanism. It is Wyoming's guarantee that counties and the state can be full participants in decisions that profoundly shape our landscapes and communities and economies. Proactively, FERNERPA equips counties with technical, legal, and organizational tools to develop natural resource management plans, secure cooperating agency status, and host initiatives such as annual congressional tours that bring decision makers face to face with the realities of Wyoming public lands. Reactively, it ensures the federal agencies such as the Bureau of Land Management, Forest Service, or National Park Service do not advance policies that overlook priorities. With FERNERPA, counties have the standing, expertise, and resources to respond effectively through comments, consistency reviews, and, when necessary, litigation. And as counties approach the 5-year shelf life of their current natural resource management plans, continued FERNERPA support will ensure those plans remain updated, defensible, and usable not only for counties themselves, but also for the Attorney General's office in protecting the state's interest in the court. At its core, FERNERPA levels the playing field between federal agencies and Wyoming's counties. It transforms counties from passive stakeholders into proactive partners and credible challengers, ensuring that federal land management decisions reflect not only national policy, but also the values and economies and livelihoods of the people who live and work on the land every day. For Wyoming's counties, FERNERPA is not optional. It is an essential to preserving both our local economy and the state's enduring connection to its natural resources. And so looking back again, just in a little bit of the history there, back when I was president, we not having the position of Micah's or now Tristan's there, we have the ability just in our effectiveness has just grown exponentially there. And it's amazing to see how effective we are as counties across the state when we team up together and have that ability to just give Micah a call, or Micah gives us a call, or call Tristan or anything like that. And it's been a very, very good use of those FNRPA dollars, and really hope that would continue. So with that, I do want to touch on one more thing, just back on those relationships and building those working relationships with the federal agencies. When I look back at the BLM RMP, oil and gas was big in the Bighorn Basin. It's not as big elsewhere now. The grass is greener, but I hope one of these days grass greens up for the Bighorn Basin as far as oil and gas. But one of the things that having had those relationships got established, and we've done it twice now, was oil and gas and industry meetings with the BLM to go over whether it's the onshore orders that they have that the industry deals with, and get those industry folks in a room with the BLM, so they got a face to go with the name, and that was well received, I think, on both the BLM in the Bighorn Basin and the oil and gas industry to get together there, and that I don't think we would have been able to do that prior to, if we hadn't built those working relationships, because I could just go right down and talk to the field manager and hey, can we get this set up? I mean, I worked well that first time we put it together, and got that second round in there, and again, like to continue that. So that just things like that is just important, and bringing people from across all the spectrum there. So with that, in closing, we respectfully request the committee to, number one, support continued funding of the FNRPA, ensuring Wyoming counties and the state of Wyoming have the resources to proactively and reactively engage in federal decision making. And number two, dedicate resources for counties to update and maintain their natural resource plans, so that these plans remain current, defensible, and actionable, guiding federal land and resource management decisions. Sustained investment in FNRPA paired with targeted support for county planning ensures that Wyoming local governments and the state can protect values, steward our resources, and defend our way of life in the face of ever-changing policy. Thank you for your time today, and we now stand for any questions.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Any questions from the committee for the county commission, the commissioners, or the association representatives? Senator Doxton, I see your light on.
Remind me, what have we been investing in this? Thanks for coming. What have we been investing in this? And then your next point, the resources, further explain those. You want those resources further dedicated. Just remind me the dollar amount.
Chairman Wharf.
Go ahead, Micah.
Thank you. Senator Docksetter, the current funding, I think, has been sitting around about $1 million. And I think that funding is sufficient as far as being able to have access to programming and all the work. As far as the updating of natural resource plans, I can't tell you exactly what that would cost. Counties most recently updated plans. I think some of the things that you heard from Nolan Rapp was that we had plans completed as recent as 2022. Some of those plans may not need to be drastically updated. However, the reason why we need to update plans continually is that resources change. So for example, in the last administration, we had a programmatic environmental impact statement on solar. Wyoming, in BLM's previous solar plan, was a non-player. But now the technology has increased. Wyoming has a very large swath right in Representative Davis's neck of the woods that they believe would be appropriate for federal solar deployment. And so if Sweetwater County, if Carbon County don't have anything in their natural resource plan dealing with solar, when those solar projects get offered, there's nothing for the county to fall back on for the federal government to be consistent with, to coordinate with. So these would be, I would say, more tailored adjustments. The lift in 2019 was huge. It put Wyoming on the map as far as having plans. And again, going back to my discussion with going to Idaho, Wyoming's natural resource plans are being copied right now by counties across the West because they want to have the same access and opportunity that our counties have had for going on at least a decade. So I don't know if there's a specific number or amount, but at some point there might be need for more than just those small adjustments, revisions to those natural resource plans.
Follow-up?
No, okay. Well, maybe. Used to work with a colleague in the House a long, long time ago. And he'd always get up and preface his comments. He'd say, if it's good enough for Carbon County, it's good enough for Wyoming. And I noticed our Commissioner Espy was very proud of his county. You see kind of a diversity. I mean, I've been over and seen your wind operations. I look down the table. We've got oil and gas sitting at the table too. What you're doing covers all of it, gentlemen. Are we well covered with the plans we have now?
Go on.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Dockstader, speaking from Carbon County's point of view, I think we're in a decent place. We're in the process right now of updating our land use plan. We're going through that on our own. When we did our natural resource plan, we found some areas in our land use plan that needed to probably be updated. To the solar thing, in Carbon County, we preclude any commercial scale electron generation, aka wind or solar, to occur inside Sage-Grouse core area. That has been carved out in Carbon County. So we did that years ago there, but it's, I think, more of tweaking going forward. That's kind of, I think, a responsibility on us as counties to, if we identify that, if it does become more than what we can handle, then maybe come ask for something. But that's our skin in the game too, my opinion. You helped get us there. It's up to us to help to maintain it. That's Commissioner Espy's point of view.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And I believe we have another comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Building on Micah's about the changes that can happen, battery storage is something that most of us hadn't talked about on federal land. And if you happen to have a wind farm, particularly solar, may have to look at that. In our county, the oil and gas technology has changed dramatically. They're talking 3-mile laterals, which changes the surface impact, the mineral extract. So there are these tweaks that we have to address on an ongoing basis. So they're not a static document. They should be a living document that gets regular update. And the legislature, with that infusion that got us to a really good spot, the resources we have with Micah and Tristan will help us there, but there may be a need for some counties to do a heavier lift depending on their resources available. And I say that their money available to do it. None of us have the time. So how do we allocate that? So I think that would be the ongoing that we need to be aware of, both what we can do with ourselves and what we can do in conjunction with the FNRPA account and the people we have at the WCCA level. But those are just two examples that weren't in ours that now we're going to have to think about how do you address them. And they have completely different impacts. Battery is pretty minimal. Land disturbance being less for oil and gas, it's generally a positive thing. So those are things that we need to adjust. I won't say on the fly, but a living document.
Go ahead, Mr. Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Senator Dockstader. In Washakie County, when I came on the commission, we had a comprehensive land use plan that was very outdated. It was 1978 was the last time it had been revised. And that was one of the things that I had noted when I campaigned there is like, when you're dealing with the federal agencies there, what you have in your plan is what they look at, and looking back to see how outdated it was something we wanted to update. And when you look at what the Clinton administration and Secretary Babbitt was doing to the West at the time there, it was important. So we did get that plan updated, and then along came the funds to be able to, we created the Natural Resource Management Plan and took partially built off of what we had as a comprehensive plan. It was very good for us, but as times have changed and we've seen what's gone on in the last 20 years plus that I've been on the commission there, just the ability to fine tune our plan will be essential as we go forward. But it's been a very great asset for us there. And I look back again on the Bighorn Forest Plan revision that we had done. I think Mike could probably attest to it when we went through the NOGA process there. Our forest plan revision for the Bighorns was cited on numerous occasions that I think we were almost ahead of our time with the cooperating agency status, that we were so focused on coming up with a good plan there that when they looked at it from NOGA, it was like, wow, that plan is 20 years old, but still very useful in current times, and that it's slated to be revised in 2032. So yeah, that's a long time has gone by when they look to have revisions every 15 years on those. But again, back to the land use plans, it's having that basic, well, not basic, a comprehensive plan in place, just tweaking those to make them stay up with the times and make sure we as local counties officials are staying on top of the issues. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Doxter, I just want to kind of repeat, I'm not going to repeat what they said, but I'm just going to remind you also, you know, 5 years ago when the legislature gave us this major boost of funding to put together these natural resource plans, there was enough consultants that were used in multiple counties that it kind of helped streamline that cost down. I'm going to fast forward just a little bit to what Commissioner Espy mentioned. They're going through their land use plan right now on the county level. We just completed one in Park County, and it was 6 times the cost of what our original natural resource management plan. So, you know, just to update one today, I would suspect is not going to be what a good deal we had, even though it give us the basics, and a lot of these just need tweaking. But it is definitely in Park County, and I totally agree. We need to keep up to date. Things changed, and so the cost of that going forward is not good. I wish we could say it's a one and done deal, but it isn't. We found that out in our land use plan because of our county land use plan was 20 years old, that we basically had to almost start over. So we don't want to do that. We want to try to go into our every 5 to 6 years on our natural resource management plan and just tweak it to hopefully we won't get hit with a big fund. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think you guys are doing an outstanding job, but on the other hand, you know, industry, everything is changing in Wyoming, you know, and if we're behind the ball, as you say, we're on the plate, you know, with the development of rare earth minerals, uranium, the reinvestment in that, these data centers, water, you know, things like that, the grid. I see a tremendous, if we're going to be partners in the development here in the state of Wyoming, we need to be a little more in front instead of behind. Does that make sense? And if funding is the issue, then we need to, on the legislative side, in my opinion, is have that funding available to get these plans updated, because you guys are the first line of defense for the state of Wyoming. You're the backbone behind it. So that's my take on this.
Jeremiah, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would just simply say that I agree. And I think you heard a number of the commissioners talk about us moving from a reactive phase, which is where we were for a really long time. You gave us the ability to flip that switch a bit the last legislative session, particularly within the association, to hire a second person. And so now we're able to go into more of a proactive phase of the work. That's not to say the things that they're talking about, the land use planning, that is part of being that proactive. So it is a continued investment. I would love to say it's, you know, we can wrap this up and put a bow on it and put it behind us, but Unfortunately, these are still lands in federal hands, and we're going to have to work with the federal agencies and with the industry, as you said, to understand these issues and how we can better support our communities.
Okay, thank you. Co-Chairman Ide, I think you had a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is, by the way, thank you all for coming down, and I learned a lot about what you guys do with FNRPA, and that was excellent. So appreciate you taking the time out today and coming here. The question I have is a little broader, probably. You know, we ran some legislation this past session, demand for equal footing. You know, it was more of what we were promised at statehood and our active admission for equal footing of the original 13 states. And they were jealous about having, you know, jurisdiction over everything within inside their borders, which we don't. We're effectively a half of a state. When you look at the surface, about 47%, and the minerals at about 70%. You know, sometimes you just, you know, I do feel like, you know, a colonist of 10 square miles back east somewhere that rules over us, and we have to live with the dictates that they send down, the edicts, and we end up being on the defensive all the time. It's good to hear of, you know, having FNRPA and the funds to be on the offensive and not get steamrolled there again by that. So we lost that vote by one vote in the Senate to send a demand to Congress, the president, Speaker of the House, Senate President, to essentially do what Utah has done in the past with no results. But you gotta ask nicely a lot of times and see where it goes. Outside of that, you know, Utah filed that lawsuit to original jurisdiction to the U.S. Supreme Court, demanding, you know, 18 million acres transferred to state control. And, you know, that got turned away. We got Mountain States Legal Foundation pro bono. We got 26 legislators to sign on and amicus that lawsuit. And, you know, it was basically they were asking for the unappropriated lands in Utah. Our approach was a little bit different. Where does the county commissioners, not to drone on here, where do you guys, did you guys look at that Utah lawsuit, and where did you stand on that? I don't really remember, but since we got a whole panel here, it would be nice to get some thoughts here on you know, how we get sovereignty and jurisdiction back here eventually, potentially. I mean, these administrations come and go. And, you know, the last one wasn't very helpful for taking away our #1 industry in Wyoming, which was, you know, federal or natural resources, oil and gas, coal. They were trying to put us out of business. Day one, he shut down oil and gas lease sales. Then you get the, you know, the Buffalo RMP and the Rock Springs RMP, and it's just like they're wanting to make us a full colonist, almost like Nevada, where we'll end up being 85% sovereignty in this state. So anyway, just some comments on that to see as a group what your guys' thoughts are on you're on the front lines. We take it from the legislature. We have a lot of people behind us, but obviously not enough the last time around. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Jeremiah.
Senator Ide, that there's a lot there, and certainly appreciate that. I will say, yes, we have tracked not only what you all were proposing as well as what is proceeding in other jurisdictions. It is of interest to our membership. We have not established a position on that particular issue. I suspect if I put it to the membership, we'd probably split a bit like you all did in that debate. And, you know, this is getting into the weeds. Our threshold for establishing in particular legislative positions is 70% of our membership. So I don't know that we would get there. We will continue to analyze, and I suspect there are commissioners here that could give you their own personal perspectives on that particular issue. I think there's a strong ethos of you know, the value of public lands and recreation and you know, the great outdoors in the state of Wyoming, and concern about what, you know, legislation might do in that particular realm. But there are a lot of people that understand those incredible you know, issues that you're bringing up, and those are the things that I think our membership are trying to solve on a daily basis to get more of that decision-making capacity, that you know, the actual decisions into people that are at least in Wyoming to make those decisions, if not being made by state or local representatives. And I will leave it to the commissioners if they.
Go ahead. I just want to point out, we're getting close on time. So if we can make our comments a little shorter, maybe, because we still got to have public comment, and then the committee's got to have time to do stuff too. So go ahead, Micah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll make my comments brief, just because they touch on NEPA, and that's what I do every single day. Disposition of public lands does occur almost every year in this country. Not at the scale that and the speed that some people would like. So you saw that in the Big Beautiful Bill, Mike Lee's proposal to have quicker disposition of lands. Particularly in that instance, it included Forest Service lands, which for some of our counties, including Park, a much you know, a larger swath of those lands. The nice thing about disposition, as it currently exists for the BLM, is that happens in the planning process. So these county commissioners, when they're looking at the Bighorn RMP, can identify lands and put that into the NEPA document for disposal. So there is not maybe the fastest, not maybe the greatest avenue, but there are some levers that local governments can pull to get federal lands back into state, private, or county hands. So just throw that out there, that there is some possibility there. And to Senator Doxeter's comment about how can we make cut hay when the sun's shining, the Forest Service doesn't have a very strong disposition system. It's essentially only when Congress passes a law that says we're going to dispose of certain lands in these places. The BLM has a standard system which would allow for, again, resource management plans to identify those parcels. So that could be an area that the legislature looks at, you know, as far as the Forest Service, if that was of interest.
Thank you, Micah. Just to speed it up, I had one question. Jeremiah, do we have any counties in the state that have not actually drafted or prepared a natural resource management plan? Maybe, I don't know if it's better for you or for Micah.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, there are a few that have not done that. You know, I'll just use Laramie County as one example. Not a whole lot of federal lands or federal mineral resources, and so they didn't see the utility of, you know, utilizing that fund that had been put forward for them.
Okay, and I guess the one reason I brought that up is it's been mentioned that we're helping other states kind of spread that. I think it makes sense to also help our own counties. Some of the counties may need more help, and they may need some leadership to get them to see beyond the value that they play just within their specific county versus coming in and supporting their neighboring counties. Because there's a lot to be said, and you know that well. If we're all pulling the same direction and you got counties that aren't impacted, still helps to show a united front. So that would be something I'd encourage you guys to maybe try to get those counties that don't really see a need for that, but help them maybe see that need.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I can, to be clear, those counties are incredibly supportive of the effort that we're undertaking and the fact that other counties do. It's just they simply haven't seen where having that plan benefits them because they just don't have interaction with the federal agencies all that much. Now, that said, Laramie County does have the potential for other things to impact them and other counties. Let's just say Preble's Jumping Mouse came back as an ESA issue. That might be a place where them having a plan could be beneficial. And so, yeah, we would certainly articulate that.
I think we have one commissioner want to make comment.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think really to address the National Association of Counties has just stood up a portal to where we can, Carbon County's natural resource plan was the first document put into that portal to where especially public land counties, we can share those because plagiarism is legal in government. And so those counties that don't have their states backing them or whatever, we're trying to develop at a regional, especially west-wide level to have those resources available to those others, and which for us, we can go in and look at counties that have similar natural resource issues that we do and how are they handling those things. That is just one of the things we're trying to do so that we're all the oxen are all pulling in the same direction. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Just really quick.
Okay.
Because I know we're out of time.
Yeah, go ahead, Senator.
It's on your theme, Mr. Co-Chair. To you, Mr. Christensen, Mike, are we fully utilizing you for our counties that are tied in with the federal governments? I realize there are some counties that it's not a big deal. I know my county commissioners get tired of hearing from me because I said, why aren't we in Jackson talking to the supervisor? I'll go up and talk to him. Why aren't we in DC talking to the head of the BLM? I'll go out and talk to her. That type of thing, previous administration. Are we fully utilizing your resources, your ability to make it happen for our Lincoln County counties that have federal land?
Micah?
Chairman, Senator Doxeter. I would love if Lincoln County was here to answer it for themselves as far as their personal opinion, but I think the answer is generally yes. Relationships take a long time to develop. Just a couple weeks ago at our Waco conference in Rock Springs, we had the Deputy Undersecretary of Natural Resources and the Environment, Kristen Sleeper, came to our conference. She spoke on roadless. She spoke on forest revision. She spoke on the USDA's reorganization. She spoke on the Bridger Teton forest planning effort and the Black Hills forest planning effort. We have a lot of pull. I think it's often said that Wyoming boxes above its weight class. I think that is very true. And it's largely in part to the commissioners that are up on the table, holding leadership positions in national associations, our commitment to going to DC to speak with agencies and agency leadership. I mean, this group met with the forest chief on his very first day in the office. We were the very first meeting he had at 9:15 on a Friday. We also just so happened to have the last meeting with the previous forest chief, Chief Moore, on a Thursday afternoon at about 4:30. So I think we're doing a very good job, but it's a question of keeping your foot on the gas pedal. It's a commitment to maintaining the good relationship we have with the governor's office and our state partners at the agency level, because we need sort of everyone again rowing in the same direction. And to the extent that counties need more assistance, I'm always available to be reached out to. We draft a lot of comments, we put together a lot of meetings, and we do a lot of education and training. So
Thank you. With that, I appreciate all the testimonies and interaction that we were able to have. I'm going to open it up now for public comments, and we'll see how many we got in the room. Is there anybody in the room? I don't see anybody. No, still don't see anybody. No. I got to razz you a little bit. Tell us who you are, and that way everybody knows.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Co-Chair, members of the committee, Jim McGagnon with the Wyoming Stockholders Association. Just briefly make a couple of points. We've been strong advocates and supporters of FNRPA funding from the very beginning because as the group that geographically uses more federal lands in the state than any other resource user, we're dependent on how those lands are managed. And Washington DC doesn't know how to manage a parcel of land in any particular county. Quite frankly, neither does the state BLM office or the regional forester. It's got to be the people on the ground involved. And so we're heavily dependent on the fact that the county commissioners, along in Wyoming with our conservation districts, are the only two entities that have a seat at the table earlier in the process, in the assessment phase and in the development of proposed plan revisions or plan amendments. One thing we would like to see is that moved even further ahead. These typical plan revisions take 4 to 7 years. In the case of the Rock Springs RMP, it's more like 15 years. And if the counties could be at the table when the agency is making a decision whether or not to undertake a plan revision, and I understand they are not at that point, a lot of these perhaps could be avoided. They could say, well, we don't need to revise this plan. We could just amend it in 2 or 3 places, move forward with it. Or here's some ways to expedite that process, and it would assist the federal process and also mean less expenditure and less effort for the county. So that's something at the federal level that we would certainly be interested in working with the counties to accomplish. With regard to the Forest Service, I had the opportunity to host the new chief of the Forest Service for 2 days in Wyoming this summer. And it was tremendous discussion with good neighbor policy, his strong interest in increasing the engagement and the decision-making actually at the local levels. Unfortunately, I don't see that to that degree in the BLM yet, partly because they're still lacking leadership at the federal level, but we'll have to see where that one goes. But I would make note, because so often I hear good neighbor authority discussed in Wyoming in the context of forestry, of timber harvest, fire management, critical items. It's equally critical in the case of livestock grazing, and our Wyoming Department of Agriculture has done an outstanding job in entering into good neighbor agreements with the Forest Service in particular. They've started a little bit with the BLM, but primarily with the Forest Service. If we could expand that and see that some dollars are made available to that department, federal dollars we've requested specific for that purpose, I think that could be really valuable. Because we as the users of these public lands, our input is necessarily reactionary. We don't get to help devise proposals. We have to react to what's put out there, and trying to change something that agency personnel have worked on, put out there, is challenging. So to the extent that the counties make sure that more reasonable, workable things for the local constituencies, whatever they may be, are put forward, that's just critical to us. In earlier comments, you were mentioning thinking outside of the box. So I want to very briefly share one experience with you that I had 30 years ago. And I had the opportunity to serve as the Federal Land Policy Director for then Governor Geringer. And at the request of and working with Senator Wallop, we identified the Bighorn Forest in Wyoming as unique in a couple of ways. It is not adjacent to any other forest. It stands alone. It's entirely within the state of Wyoming. And under Senator Wallop's direction, we put together a plan whereby the state would take over the management of the Bighorn Forest, still subject to all the federal laws that were in place, but the management, the development of the plan and the management would be under an entity that would be created with the state, that would be made up of representatives from each of the counties that are adjacent in some way to the Bighorn Forest. And within the federal parameters, they would manage that forest. It finally kind of went away before we had resolved all the funding issues related to it, but it's a concept that perhaps deserves some thought at some point again in the future. So I just throw that out to make you aware of it, thinking outside of the box. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I don't want to take up more of your time. I do, in closing, have to raise objection to one of the earlier comments that you heard from Commissioner Willix, when he indicated that being at the table and getting turkey would be a win. In Wyoming, if it wasn't beef or lamb, it was a loss. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Jim, for that correction. Are there any questions? Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Co-Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Director Magagna, or Executive Vice President. I'm not sure exactly how you refer your title, but
Anything janitor works.
you mentioned the Bighorn National Forest in your conversations there, and you referred to it as management of that forest, but it would still, in your comments, I assume, would still be under federal ownership. That's kind of contrary to what we were promised at statehood and in the U.S. Constitution under the property clause, where they're mandated to dispose at some point. You know, there's no timeline given on that. What are your thoughts on ownership versus management? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Chairman, I certainly would like to see more land ownership in Wyoming than federal. I don't see the Forest Service as a starting point for something like that. I think the BLM land is more suitable to beginning to go down that path. So in the case of the Forest Service, the idea of a larger management role for the state and for the counties while still maintaining the federal so-called ownership or jurisdiction would be more doable, at least in the short term, and perhaps doable, something could be doable under the current administration. And as much as I don't disagree with all and what your goal is there, I think we're a long ways from being able to make that happen. And we need to do some other things in the interim rather than let them manage the way they want to manage.
Thank you. With that, is there any other public testimony? We have anybody online? Senator Larson, can you still hear us?
Yep, I'm here and you're doing good.
All right. I just want to make sure you weren't napping. All right. The committee, do we need to take a quick break? We're 3 minutes behind, but I'm good to keep going on. I just want to make sure, do we need to take let's take a 5-minute break if we can real quick. Thank you. I apologize. We took a little bit more time than anticipated, but we're back now and we're going to move on to the third item. Well, I guess we've taken the public comments. Last thing on item number 2 was committee directives. And I wasn't sure if the committee, do we have an idea, anything we wanted to do?
Mr. Chairman, I think we have a lot on our plate, especially with a budget session coming up here and the bills that we've already drafted coming out of here. So I think it's probably, at least my thoughts, is not to give any more directives on, especially with the budget session coming up. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Co-Chair, I agree. I think we got some really good ideas. I'm going to continue to ask everybody to think about how we improve, what's the next big thing we can achieve. So think about that, because we are going to be on a budget cycle. And I am going to do everything I can to minimize the number of bills that are non-budget related, because I want us to get back on track. And I don't want our committee to be one that's got 20 different bills. So with that, we'll move on to the third item, the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. And Talise, right?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Talise Hanson, Staff Attorney LSO, presenting the memorandum in your packet on the National Environmental Policy Act, also known as NEPA. So this memorandum provides background information on the history of NEPA, NEPA's provisions, and the constitutional basis for Congress enacting NEPA. This was requested at the committee's June meeting. So NEPA was enacted into law on January 1st, 1970, and was the first major environmental law in the United States. NEPA requires all federal agencies to examine the environmental impacts of all major federal actions significantly affecting the quality of the human environment. A major federal action is an action the federal agency who is conducting the action determines is subject to substantial federal control and responsibility. A recent United States Supreme Court case from 2025 held that NEPA is a purely procedural statute and does not impose any substantive environmental obligations or restrictions. The court further noted in that case that NEPA prescribes the necessary process for an agency's environmental review of a project. Once a major federal action triggers NEPA, the federal agency must assess whether the major federal action requires the development of an environmental impact statement, an environmental assessment, or if the major federal action is categorically excluded or otherwise exempted. To determine whether a major federal action requires an environmental impact statement or an environmental assessment, the federal agency must analyze whether the major federal action has a reasonably foreseeable significant effect on the quality of the human environment. If the major federal action has a reasonably foreseeable significant effect on the quality of the human environment, then the federal agency must prepare an environmental impact statement. On the other hand, if the major federal action does not have a reasonably foreseeable significant effect on the quality of the human environment, or if the significance of such effect is unknown, then the federal agency must prepare an environmental assessment. Federal agencies can use an environmental assessment to help determine whether impacts are significant. If the impacts are significant, then the agency must then prepare an environmental impact statement. But if the impacts are not significant, then the agency issues a finding of no significant impact. NEPA requires an environmental impact statement to be a detailed statement and outlines several requirements that must be included in the environmental impact statement. So Congress may determine statutory exemptions for NEPA. Congress has exempted specific projects. For example, the first exemption to NEPA occurred in 1973 when Congress passed the Trans-Alaska Pipeline Authorization Act, which exempted the Trans-Alaska Pipeline project from NEPA. In addition to specific project exemptions, Congress has enacted numerous broad exceptions covering entire types of activities. For example, Congress has exempted actions taken by federal agencies in accordance with the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act. NEPA also authorizes federal agencies to adopt categorical exclusions. A categorical exclusion refers to a type of action that a federal agency has determined normally does not significantly affect the quality of the human environment. Federal agencies have directly established categorical exclusions after looking at their existing activities and noting which ones consistently have no significant environmental impact. NEPA authorizes federal agencies to adopt other federal agencies' categorical exclusions. So NEPA also established the Council on Environmental Quality, also known as CEQ. Some of the duties of CEQ are to develop and recommend to the President of the United States national policies to foster and promote the improvement of environmental quality to meet the conservation, social, economic, health, and other requirements and goals of the nation. Review federal programs and activities to ensure they are meeting the goals of NEPA. Gather information concerning the conditions, trends, and changes in the environment, and annually report to the President on the state and condition of the environment. In 1970, President Nixon issued an executive order instructing CEQ to establish guidelines for federal agencies on NEPA's requirements to provide a thorough statement on the environmental impacts of proposed legislation and federal actions. As a result, CEQ published a memorandum outlining guidelines for federal agencies issuing environmental impact statements. The courts at the time held that CEQ's guidelines were advisory and non-binding suggestions and were a way to assist federal agencies in developing their own NEPA procedures. In 1977, President Carter issued an executive order that directed CEQ to establish standard regulations for all federal agencies to guide their implementation of NEPA procedures. This executive order directed federal agencies to comply with the regulations issued by CEQ. In 1978, CEQ finalized legally binding rules. CEQ amended one provision of its rules in 1986, but otherwise CEQ's regulations remained unchanged for over 40 years. In 2017, President Trump issued an executive order directing CEQ to modernize, simplify, and accelerate the NEPA process. These rules were finalized in 2020. The 2020 rules set a presumption time limit within which agencies should complete environmental assessments and environmental impact statements, aimed to limit the effects of proposed federal actions that must be analyzed in an environmental impact statement by simplifying the definition of an effect, and prevented federal agencies from promulgating more elaborate or extensive procedures to implement NEPA by establishing CEQ's regulations as a ceiling. In 2021, President Biden issued an executive order to review and address regulatory actions taken by the Trump administration that were inconsistent with specified environmental, public health, and climate objectives. CEQ made revisions in a two-phased approach. Phase 1 of CEQ's rules were finalized in 2022, which generally reverted to the 1978 rules by adopting the 1978 rules definition of federal actions, expanding the range of alternatives that must be considered in an environmental impact statement, and removed the ceiling provisions by reinstating the prior understanding and practices that CEQ's NEPA regulations functioned as a floor rather than a ceiling. Phase 1 left some of the 2020 rules intact, like the provision that allowed federal agencies to adopt the categorical exclusions of other federal agencies. After the Phase 1 rules were implemented, but before CEQ published a draft of the Phase 2 rules, Congress enacted into law the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2023. This act mainly contained budgetary provisions, but it also contained a section called the Builder Act. The Builder Act in part streamlined NEPA's environmental review provisions by codifying part of CEQ's 2020 rules and other changes to NEPA made by the Trump administration. It revised NEPA by defining a list of actions not considered to be a major federal actions under NEPA, imposed page and time limits of environmental documents, required agencies to analyze the negative environmental impacts of the no action alternative to the federal action under review, and changed the requirements of environmental impact statements. Phase 2 of CEQ's rules were finalized in 2024, which implemented changes made by the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2023, removed the language language describing NEPA as a procedural statute and required federal agencies to identify an environmentally preferable alternative and draft environmental impact statements rather than at the time of the final record of decision as the prior rules required. In 2024, several states challenged CEQ's Phase 2 rules in the United States District Court for the District of North Dakota on several grounds, including that the rules violated NEPA and the Federal Administrative Procedure Act by exceeding CEQ's authority and making changes inconsistent with NEPA. The district court held that CEQ does not have authority under NEPA to issue regulations because the plain text of the statute does not give CEQ authority to issue binding regulations. NEPA only authorizes CEQ to make recommendations to the president. The United States District Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia made a similar conclusion that CEQ had no lawful authority to promulgate their rules because no statute, including NEPA, gave CEQ rulemaking authority. In January 2025, President Trump issued an executive order that directed CEQ to rescind its NEPA regulations. CEQ rescinded its NEPA regulations in April of 2025. In July of 2025, the United States Department of Interior partially rescinded its NEPA regulations by only retaining NEPA rules relating to categorical exclusions, emergency response, applicant environmental impact statements, and environmental assessments prepared by applicants, and using department-directed contractors to prepare environmental documents. Currently, the majority of the department's NEPA procedures are located in a department handbook that is separate from the Code of Federal Regulations. So moving on to the constitutional basis for NEPA at the end of the memo. The constitutional basis for NEPA is the Commerce Clause and the Property Clause. The Commerce Clause has served as the constitutional basis for nearly every major environmental law passed by Congress. The Commerce Clause provides that Congress has the power to regulate commerce within 4 nations and among the states and with Indian tribes. The Property Clause has been argued to serve as an additional constitutional basis for environmental laws like NEPA. The Property Clause provides that Congress shall have the power to dispose of and make all needful rules and regulations respecting the territory or other property belonging to the United States. The courts have not held NEPA unconstitutional under the Commerce Clause or the Property Clause, and I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Talise. I don't know, how do we do this? Your Council Hanson. Committee members, do you have any questions? Go ahead,
Chairman.
Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you, Talise. That was a nice report. That was a lot of work. I always focus in on the end of this, on the constitutional authority and to establish NEPA and, the Commerce Clause. And you even mentioned that in there. Sometimes that gets stretched out a lot. And it's sort of a catch-all for more government edicts effectively to control the states. And then you reference the Property Clause in there, and the language in the Property Clause, I don't know, I need to look into this a little bit more, but I've always been schooled that the property, the power to dispose of and make all needful rules and regulations, I think that make needful rules and regulations applies to when they dispose, not as a broad sense of just, and it refers to territory. So at the time they dispose, it becomes, state lands or however that happens. And then the rules and regulations are more for the territorial lands when, the former federal territorial lands at that point in time. Yeah. So anyway, no, that's good information. I don't know if you have any, co-chairman here, we've got so many of these, so-called federal laws that just, that's why we're $37 trillion in debt, is because we've got all of these agencies and making all of these rules and regulations. At some point, maybe the states stand up and nullify and let them play defense instead of us playing defense. I mean, I don't know if NEPA, what would your comments be if the state of Wyoming said, we don't believe NEPA is constitutional and we're going to go ahead and not comply, nullify your NEPA legislation, and you guys come after us instead of us going after them? Would you have a comment on that? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Chairman Ide, I don't think I'm prepared to make a comment on that as of right now.
That's probably wise. It looks like Mr. Erickson, Representative Erickson has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to address one quick part of this, and that's the categorical exclusions and other exemptions. Talise, I see that there is a lot of latitude in those, and I kind of want to get what your opinion is as far as the direction of federal land agencies. Are they using those? Because that looks like it has a ton of latitude for us to work through, but yet it's kind of went away. You know, I've been in the industry for a long time, timber and mineral extraction, lots of different things, energy production, and we used to use those a lot more, the categorical exclusions. Is it because, what, in your opinion, is it because the federal government is getting tied up with so many other regulations that they're ignoring that? Or what do you think about the direction that we're headed with using CADXs?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Erickson, I don't have firsthand knowledge about how the categorical exclusions are used, but I will note that in the memo on page 4, I listed some examples of BLM's categorical exclusions, and there were a lot more than that. So I would just say that it probably depends on if the project can fall into one of those categorical exclusions, but I do think that they are there and that they can be used if a project falls into them. And with federal agencies being able to adopt categorical exclusions from other agencies, I think that broadens the scope of the available categorical exclusions that could be used for projects, because they're allowed to adopt other agencies, which just broadens the list if a project were to fall under one of those.
Any other questions? And I'm sure that when we're working this next session, I'm sure we'll have the opportunity, if we have questions, I'm sure we can talk to both of our good LSO attorneys and give them things to maybe be looking at for bills that we would put together for the next year, the general session. Thank you. And I guess we'll open it up for public comment. Anybody here that wants to speak on this topic? I'm not seeing anybody. Oh, wait a minute. There is one person. I did too, but you don't have to take the whole hour, Jim, but we got about an hour.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Jim McGagnon with the Wyoming Stockholders Association. Just one point that I think is critical to keep in mind when we're talking about NEPA. The problem is not with the law. The problem is that it's become a gilded pathway to litigation. And that's part of the answer to Representative Erickson. The reason they don't use more categorical exclusions, their fear of litigation. And I don't know how many times I've sat in federal land agency offices or other federal natural resource agencies and said, why can't we do this? Well, we would like to do this, but we'll get sued. And that's the standard answer. And so if we could fix that, and I'm not sure how, I mean, there's been discussion, we'll put more of a burden on, if you bring a lawsuit on your NEPA, that you have to fund the other side, or what do you do? But it's just, you know, as much as we have problems with federal agencies, I find myself more often than not in the courtroom defending a federal agency action because it's been challenged by radical groups and they don't challenge it on substance because that's more complex. It's just so easy to bring a challenge based on procedural compliance with NEPA. And if you select the right judge, it's not hard for a judge to say, yeah, you should have done a little more in-depth NEPA analysis. Go back and do that again. Sometimes they'll stop a project to do that. Other times they'll say, well, you can proceed, but you need to go back and do more NEPA. We're dealing with that right now on the Bridger Teton Forest with authorizing some cattle grazing on some allotments that were formerly sheep allotments. Not even trying to increase the amount of grazing, just increase the amount of geography that these permittees can utilize, and ended up in court. 10th Circuit said, you've got to go back and your NEPA analysis was inadequate. And that's just it's just such a common thing. It happens on almost a daily basis. So I don't know what you as legislators can do about it or what any of us can do, but that's, to me, to us is the target that needs to be addressed in terms of the NEPA law. That, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to give you back your remaining 45 minutes.
Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on where you're at, Co-Chairman Ide had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. McGagna, yeah, I like your comments there, actually. So a lot of people are afraid if they don't toe the line, so to speak, that they're subject to a lawsuit if they're not following the strict wording of the NEPA legislation in Congress. You know, if you go back to the Kentucky resolutions, Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, he was more of Virginia, but those were the nullifications that they did in those resolutions. And essentially they said that, you know, if a law that Congress passes is repugnant to the Constitution, there's really no law at all. And if we stood a little firmer ground and said, hey, we're not going to comply, you end up in court and maybe you challenge this a little bit further if we want to have the backbone to do that. Is that essentially what you're saying? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ide, it's a little more nuanced perhaps, but I think I see your point there. The problem is that, at least just speaking for myself and the people I represent, we're not saying we should do away with NEPA. If we're going to take an action, we should look at what the environmental impacts of it are. We should equally look at what the economic impacts of that action are, and then make our best decision based on that. But as has been pointed out in the presentation you had, it's a procedural statute, and it's become much more than that. It's become the key to stopping progress, stopping things from going forward. And so I'm not sure what the state's stand on it can be, because it is the law. I mean, obviously we can advocate to change the law, but I think we need some careful thought into how we would propose to change it. You know, one thought that I've heard expressed, and I'm not sure this is the answer, and certainly not the whole answer, is that any entity that files a NEPA lawsuit is required to post a major bond of maybe several $1 million or that. And something to make it so it's just not so simple. I mean, I know attorneys that I've run into that's their whole livelihood. They're representing one or two organizations, and they're daily writing NEPA challenges. It's just become so widespread that it's incredible. So I'm sorry I can't offer the answer, but
Yeah, go ahead and follow up.
Yeah, quick follow up. Yeah, it's a good discussion for sure, because we're filing lawsuits, whereas they should be filing lawsuits on us potentially if we say, you know, we don't agree that it's constitutional, and if you disagree with us, then you sue us instead of us suing them on a law that we think is not it's unconstitutional. Is that a fair way to look at it?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, I think it's always fair, and an obligation of ours to look at the constitutionality of our laws. As I sit here right now, I would be hard pressed to identify something in the NEPA law, the law itself, that I would say is unconstitutional. But certainly something that could be looked at. I think it's more the way the law is being utilized, not necessarily by the agencies, but by certain segments of the public that is the challenge.
And I would probably add the court as well, because I think sometimes there's an awful lot of judge shopping that goes on, and
Yes.
and we end up with some decisions that have long-lasting impacts. That, but I do agree. We as a state, I believe, we need to start challenging more when we see the sovereignty of the state maybe not being followed. I think the county commissioners have done a good job. They've recognized the importance of having these plans play. And I think the state needs to start. That's kind of what I would like to see this committee, kind of the direction I'd like to head, is that maybe the state start looking at ways to come together, coalesce with other states to push for federal changes that really threaten our sovereignty. Because I know it's not unique to Wyoming. A lot of Western states are going through the same things that we are, but I think that's just something that we probably need to do. So,
Well, Mr. Chairman, one thought that comes to mind there, and I mean, I could sit here and rattle off the names of 2 or 3 federal judges that are just always go down that path. They're not in Wyoming, fortunately, but they get the Wyoming cases because the plaintiffs appeal to those jurisdictions. Thinking of where we are right now, whole different field where we see the current administration removing some federal judges. Could Wyoming and some other states build a case that this particular judge's decisions are just so obviously prejudicial and not consistent with the law that that judge should be removed? I don't have the answer to that, but that's maybe an avenue that could be looked at.
and maybe we have some attorneys that can help us on that.
I'll defer to them.
There's lots of attorneys around, but do we have anybody online or nobody online?
Mr.
Oh,
Mr.
we
Chairman,
got one more. Oh,
Mr.
go ahead.
Magagna, in all your years of experience, do you think we approach this at the state level, or do we team up with other states and go to our federal delegations, say in the Intermountain West, to address grazing or minerals? Or can you think of a situation recently, everything from a pipeline to grazing, there hasn't been a lawsuit over? What's our angle on this? How do we get this corrected? In your opinion, you've dealt with this a lot of years now.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Doxter, I certainly can't think of a situation like you just referenced, because look at all, I mean, we've had the wolf listed and delisted 4 or 5 times based on some of these things. We've had, it just goes on. And, you know, we're going to revise the Wyoming or the Rock Springs RMP again. At the end of that pathway we're headed down now, it's obvious there's going to be litigation, and it happens on even on specific decisions on grazing on an allotment over in Grays River, that it follows. So I don't know that I think that the pathway probably would be much stronger if we can work together with some of our neighboring states that share those same concerns. Now, those are going to be to the north and the east of us, and I don't know where we're going to find them in some other places, but certainly I think it's stronger, and maybe at some point, whether it's through a litigation effort, whether it's through lobbying the current administration to make some changes in either how they administer NEPA or even in how judges have to deal with NEPA, and that's where I would be inclined to look. Can we justifiably and legally put some constraints on the ability of judges to make such far out decisions on NEPA?
Thank you.
Thank you. And I apologize, I can't remember your name, Commissioner.
That's all right, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Jim Willix, Commerce County. and I'm speaking as an individual commissioner, not representing WCCA in this topic, but I would offer something that Mr. McGagnon said that I wholeheartedly agree with, that as many flaws as NEPA has, the first 2 hours of our conversation, it's the vehicle for us to be engaged. So eliminating it without a thorough pathway for us to be engaged at the local government level substitutes one problem for another. And so if we believe local control and local input is the most valuable, we need to work within the current rule. And as the memo says, Supreme Court has said this is constitutional. So that's the rules we're going to work within today. But I think one of the bunt singles is a reference I used earlier is the categorical exclusion. And somebody mentioned that. Here's an example we faced in Commerce County. We had a road that had been there since almost statehood that crossed a forest portion, and we wanted to rebuild it. We weren't really moving it, but it wasn't Cat X. It was a road that had been there 100 years. And we didn't jump through a lot of hoops, but we jumped through more hoops than we should have, in my opinion. I think the effort collectively in the West and with our delegation to expand Cat X, probably be sued again, but those are the things that I think is a bunt single that could be a short-term solution. Some of the things that Senator Idas mentions are home runs. You're not going to get those tomorrow. Can we get a bunt single? And one would be expanding categorical exclusions. And I suspect sitting down with industry and Mr. McGagnon and county commissioners, we could, find lots of examples. And I know Mike has it that we've advocated for. That may be a collective effort that you could do with other legislative bodies, but it's going to be a federal action. So I don't think unfortunately, you're going to sound powerless. I'm not sure there's a lot the legislature can do in those areas other than advocate. And Micah, now I stalled long enough that Micah said, "Oh my God, Willix, where are you going?" So let me correct that. But I guess that would be my advice. That I think there's opportunities in Cat X that will make the life easier and still have that local input that we think is valuable. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll sit through Micah's in case another question comes up. I will relinquish my time, I think is the term.
Go ahead, Micah.
Thank you, Chairman Worf, Co-Chairman Ide, and the rest of the committee. NEPA, it's what I do every day for counties and for the state. So I'm very familiar. I love Talisa's memo explaining its history. Right now, we are at a bit of a, I don't know if you'd call it the climax of something, but as you heard in Talisa's memo, the implementing procedures from CEQ were relatively unchanged for roughly 50 years. We since saw court action that said, we don't think CEQ has the authority. Then we ultimately had a court in North Dakota say, you don't have the authority. They actually used the children's book, The Emperor Has No Clothes, as their example. We all knew it, but we all pretended that the emperor had clothes, just like we pretended that CEQ had authority to put binding regulations on other federal agencies. So we've seen a shift, and we saw DOI, USDA, FERC, Army Corps of Engineers, DOE promulgate interim final rules. Our association, a lot of our counties commented on those. And if you'd like to see our comments, we're happy to provide those. On the changing atmosphere of NEPA, there is a big push right now for expediency, getting projects done quicker. We saw that from Congress. The FRA put a 2-year deadline on EISs, a 1-year deadline on EAs. So we will see faster NEPA documents. There is the other side of that equation, though, that one of the reasons that agencies get litigated on NEPA documents is their lack of thoroughness evaluating issues. We also saw Congress put a page limitation on documents. So what is that going to do with judicial review? And then you add one more layer, which is that the new NEPA implementing procedures from the departments, not from CEQ, have changed the game quite a bit. DOI in particular is one that the association commented on and has some concerns about. You heard from Talisa, they kept 3 things in regulation: emergency NEPA, categorical exclusions, and industry-led NEPA. We're happy that those 3 things are still in the regulations. The reason they left them in their regulations is they didn't want to create any confusion. They wanted to maintain a durable process and a commitment to those processes. They got rid of cooperating agencies. They put us in a handbook. So does that mean that DOI doesn't want to have a durable process with cooperating agencies, that they don't want to make sure that people understand the process? those were our comments. And we've requested that they put those pieces back into regulation so it's durable. And on that point, one fun thing about agency discretion is that when agencies interpret their regulations, they have a higher level of discretion. When they interpret their policies, they have a lesser deference to their discretion. So if we remove regulation and put it into a handbook, which can be crossed out with a pen at any time of the day without any public input, the court will scrutinize those decisions. They'll scrutinize that process more closely. This only can invite more litigation. It does not solve the litigation problem. But on that point, I do want to point out to the committee, there is an act right now being proposed by Bruce Westerman. It's a bipartisan act in Congress. I believe that our Representative Hageman, is engaged on it. I spoke actually with one of her staff members yesterday and parts of the committee on the SPEED Act. The SPEED Act would amend NEPA, and it would do a few things that would address some of the things that Jim Magagna spoke about earlier, things revolving around litigation. For example, it would change the statute of limitations for lawsuits. So some of you may be aware that we got hit with lots of lawsuits, over 1 million acres of federal oil and gas leases from Trump 1. Those lawsuits occurred years after the leases had been issued. Some of the operators had already drilled wells on those leases, and they were all stalled up in court. This would change the statute of limitations from 72 months, 6 years, down to 5 months, limiting the availability for people to bring those lawsuits. It also would increase or strengthen discretion given to agencies to defend their decisions. And a lot of that comes out of that 7-county case. It also limits the agency's requirements to do analysis on certain effects, including speculative effects, telling the agencies you must not evaluate speculative effects. That should not be in your document. We don't want that in our NEPA process. And then maybe most importantly, it also puts a deadline on judicial review, not on a person bringing a lawsuit, but on the court itself issuing an opinion on the NEPA document itself. So you can't have something that gets litigated and stalled for 6 years as it goes through the process. They'd be limited with 180 days to reach a conclusion, whether they support the agency's determination or they don't. So the SPEED Act, Westerman, it's a very interesting proposal. It is bipartisan at this time. It hasn't passed out of the House yet, but it could be something pointing in the right direction to making some targeted changes to NEPA as it currently works. But of course, we have to deal with the current regs as they are, the current law as it is now. So we'll continue to comment on behalf of our association and counties to make sure that particularly the cooperating agency piece is maintained. So local governments have an important voice at the table when federal agencies make decisions. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Any further questions? Okay. Do we want to do any committee directives on this? Or is it kind of like FNRPA? We kind of keep our powder dry for now?
Chairman,
Go ahead, Senator Doxton.
how would we pull together a report on what was just explained to us? The Waterman case and how our congressman is tying in with it. It'd be good for this committee to have maybe a 1-pager on it. And I'm not sure who would, our wonderful staff.
So what you're asking is if we could get maybe a 1-page summary of
Where they're at and offer our encouragement to Congresswoman Hageman.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a good idea to maybe support that directive. That sounds like that sounds like something. I just haven't read it yet.
Neither have I, but if we get a 1-pager, and then I think from Mr. Magagna, probably our correction comes at the federal level.
Well, and that's it. I think all we can do, we can't tell obviously the federal government how to do things. I think our role is to try to make sure that we get the state all pulling in the same direction, and we build those other states that will pull in the same direction so that we can empower our congressional delegation. And I think that's wise to do. I mean, I think we got enough. I just don't know. This is our last meeting, so I don't know how we would approve a letter, unless we wanted to do something that we have LSO draft us a letter
Well,
that the
yeah.
committee could review and then,
Perhaps we should, Mr. Chairman, perhaps we should see the report first, one pager, just so we know where Congresswoman Hagan is on it.
yeah, that might be important because I know sometimes you can get poison pills put on your bills that make it all so nobody wants it.
Correct.
But I'm kind of with you. It would be nice to show something, but I'm almost thinking we don't have time to come up with it.
You're correct. Mr. Chairman, on the letter, but I'd like to know where we're at. We just had a brief summary of it just now. It'd be nice to know if we're close.
Well, and I guess help me out on how you've been here a lot longer than I have.
Counsel with the staff for a moment on, we get reports.
Okay.
If we can
And-
counsel with them, and is that something feasible?
And I'm sure that we can counsel with our attorneys, our LSO staff. Talise?
Mr. Chairman, yet if you would just like a summary of a one-page summary of what the Speed Act is, what it's doing. Currently, it looks like that there was a committee meeting held in September 10th, and that was the last action on that bill currently. But yeah, if that is the direction of the committee, I'm happy to put something together.
Right. Can we, Mr. Chairman, can we do that just as a directive, or do you want a motion on that?
I'm going to defer to the body. I always feel better when all of our heads are brought together, and I guess I would just ask, is anybody opposed to that?
Mr. Chairman, absent objection, could we have a one-page report?
Yeah. Any objection? Seeing none, let's do that if we can. Talise, put together page. Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And since this is an informational letter, correct? That
Well,
were
to us.
the one page,
Yeah, to us.
just to us,
Correct.
I would suggest that we submit it to all legislators. Because this is that way they're aware of what's going on also.
Certainly. Not opposed.
Yeah, I think that's very doable. We can send that letter out to everybody once we approve it.
Yeah,
So-
that's, Mr. Chairman, after our co-chairs approve it.
All right, it looks like we can move forward with that. I don't see any resistance to that. We're gonna break early, but I want to point out we're scheduled to start promptly at 1:30 because we're gonna have the first presenter, Mr. Obermuller, is going to be coming in on Zoom. So I'm going to ask everybody to try, and those that are wanting to come back after lunch, let's try to get here a little early so we can start on time. And that's probably a big thing for me to remember. I'm always late. So don't take that as a counsel to anybody other than myself. So with that, I'll go ahead, Mr. Co-Chair.
Oh, before we break, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to finalize NEPA, good comments from everybody. Commissioner Willicks on hitting bunts and singles wins the game a lot of times, but I think a directive of this committee, we need to start acting like a state. Their enumerated powers are few and defined. And, in the future, maybe next year, I think we work towards not just bunts and singles, but root and branch on NEPA. It's just an industry killer, whether it's grazing, forestry, recreation. It's taken out all of our livelihoods here. So just keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right, we'll take a break, come back 1:30. We'll start up again. Thank you.
Where did you park?